call to order and then ask Leah to do roll call. And then we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Board Member Dyer.
Here.
Board Member Waltieri.
Here.
Board Member Goodhue. And Board Member Pomeroy and Chair Croman are absent.
So in the absence of Chair Croman this afternoon, the board has yet to appoint a vice chair. So we're looking for the board to nominate someone to be the chair of the meeting this afternoon.
How about should we nominate Mr. Dyer? I'll second. Good.
That's good enough?
That's great.
Okay.
Do we need
Okay, why don't we, so we have roll call, why don't we do the Pledge of Allegiance? Please stand.
Oh.
Is that right?
Wait, do we need to vote on the vice
Do you need to vote on it?
chair?
It's not the vice chair, but who runs the
Or
meeting?
who runs the meeting? Do we need to do a vote? No.
Sure, let's
Okay.
Okay, roll call for that then.
Okay. Board Member Dyer.
Abstain.
Board Member Waltieri.
Aye.
Board Member Goodhue.
Yes.
Okay, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now for public appearances. Under the Brown Act, public comments for matters on the agenda must relate to that agenda item, and public comments for matters not on the agenda must relate to the subject matter jurisdiction of this legislative body. Hateful, violent, or threatening speech is impermissible public comment as it interrupts the conduct of the public meeting. This is a warning that if any member of the public attending this meeting remotely violates the Brown Act by failing to comply with these requirements of the Brown Act meeting, that speaker will then be muted. So, anybody wishing to address the board on matters not on the agenda? Anyone online?
No one has their hand raised online.
Okay. Are there any announcements? I have one. I just want to let everyone know that the Carmel Heritage Society AIA Monterey Bay Home Tour is scheduled for September 8th. That's a Sunday this year between 11 and 4. And it's going to be a great one. There's 8 homes, including First Murphy. I think there are 4 Comstocks celebrating the 100th anniversary of Hansel and Gretel. And there's 3 more contemporary homes that will be on the tour as well. So it's on, I think you can get tickets now on sale at Carmel Heritage, or carmelheritage.org is the website, or aiamontereybay.org. There's also, aligning with the Comstock anniversary, Brian Congleton, architect, who also did the renovation and restoration and addition to Hansel and Gretel, will be doing a lecture on Comstock at the Carmel Foundation on Saturday. That's the 7th at 4 p.m. And that, I think tickets are for free, but you can register for it in a few days on those websites. So hope to see everyone there for those.
Good.
Okay. Next on orders of business, we have the Historic Context Statement Update Monthly Progress Report. Staff, please.
Good afternoon. As you know, we are working on a context statement update. We came to you earlier in the spring and a couple months ago, and we'll be coming to you monthly going forward for the rest of the year. Today we'll be discussing the 50% draft, but for anyone who's joining us recently, I'll just give a quick background on what this project is. The context statement is part of our general plan. It's one of the appendices. It serves as the foundation for our historic preservation program, and it's an important reference tool used by the city consultants and the city and the community when preparing and reviewing DPR forms, and to determine which properties qualify for listing on our inventory of historic resources. So the city first adopted a historic context statement back in 1994, and then it was updated in 1997, 2008, and then quite recently in 2022. That 2022 update was funded by a state Office of Historic Preservation a certified local government grant, and it was authored by past consultants. And that update was really just a 20-year extension of effort. It covered the years 1966 to 1986. It's just simply taking our context statement and adding on those later 20 years. But during the undertaking, we realized that our context statement really needed more of a comprehensive update wholesale. So we applied for and received another state grant-funded project. This project, again, will be authored by past consultants. We have our consultants here with us this evening. The update has three main goals, being 1, consistent formatting, 2, chronological themes, and 3, streamlined content. Consistent formatting is really important because the 20-year update completed just 2 years ago now doesn't match the body of the document that precedes it. And then we need chronological themes because presently the context statement is ordered thematically, but as you read it, you're jumping around in the timeline, and we feel that a chronological flow will be much better for readers and also better for future updates as they come up. And then streamlined content because currently, as one of our consultants likes to say, it's a tome and it needs to be a tool, and it's just too unwieldy for practical use. So just a couple months ago, you reviewed a 30% draft where you saw the updated table of contents and the first couple of chapters of the document. Now you've seen an additional chapter taking us up into the 1920s. So this is meant to be an informal back and forth discussion. We have our consultant here, and we'd like to hear what you think. We have a couple questions for you as well, but I'd like to ask our consultant if they have anything to say up front, or we could just wait and go from your comments.
Come up front and I'll just
come join us.
Please, yeah, come on up. So.
It's the other way around. I feel older. Hi, so
Thank you both for your hard work, first of all.
Quite welcome. So I'm Seth Bergstein, Principal of Past Consultants.
Kent Seavey, Historic Preservation Consultant, and his partner.
So the only thing I would add to Catherine's wonderful introduction is we decided, as you all remember, before the 30%, or I think it was at the 30%, to do the full rewrite. So that's when, given our budget and our timing, we had to decide what exactly does streamline mean, how do we streamline it, and I want to hear your thoughts on how the context is set up, because it's essentially a handful of primary bullet points for each time period that create the architecture that comes in during that time period. It's not every little thing that happened in this incredibly well-documented city. I mean, I alone, you probably have double, a stack of books on Carmel's history, from the cultural to the artists to the architecture to so many things, to great photography books. Alessandra Dramoff's done some books. Ms. Gualtieri's done books. So this is really meant to focus on the architecture and how someone who casually comes to Carmel, or maybe a new architect or somebody, or a new planner, or anybody that may be purchasing a house, can pick up this document and go, what do I have here? It's over 50 years old. Is it historic? Is it not? Does it have integrity? Does it not? What contextual framework does it fit in? And that's why the new approach to context statements over the last 10 years or so has been a chronological approach. You'll see, as we discussed previously, in the earlier, even if you look at our earlier, I think what we're calling the 4th or 5th edition now, it's really just grouped into broad categories like economic development, architectural development, religious and cultural, and it's difficult to fit a building within that framework. Themes the themes are designed to apply specifically to that time period. So if you look, say, for instance, at Seacoast Bohemia, which is the last theme we just completed, it's the period where all the artists come here. It's the period that creates this sort of aesthetic in the arts and crafts movement, and sort of melds together the civic improvement, the city beautiful movements, which is really what the arts and crafts expressed, and also the ideal lifestyle. So this is still a period where we're not quite yet where which we'll discuss, which we'll be doing in the next theme, which is a big one, where so much of Carmel grows in the 1920s to World War II, where so much of Main Street comes in, the commercial district, the conservation district, and of course the Comstock houses and all the great 20s period houses. So that's the next theme, but you'll see the structure is very consistent from theme to theme. It's going to introduce each page with a photograph, a summary of what the main bullet points are, and then we expound on the bullet points. Then we want to do, and we have so far, fairly lengthy architectural development that's within that theme. And then we go to our evaluation where you'll see the photos of character defining features for the various styles within the time period. And then eligibility, significance charts, and historic integrity and eligibility. So.
And one of the things we're doing is employing photographs of buildings that are listed, historically listed. So there's no question about its authenticity.
Listed and also on the survey. I think when we both realize when we get to more the modernist themes, when we want to expound on the ranch styles, things like that, we may have to just do stuff from the street because a lot of that stuff is really not on the inventory. But we'll get there. Anyway, we'd just love to hear anyone's questions or comments. Catherine and Marnie have done an amazing edit. Really amazing comments. I really feel like someone's coming behind us and really reading it with a fresh eye. It's added time to our work, but very, very appreciated, very useful. So we've already gone through that before you got it. There's a couple of stylistic things. I noticed a few photos got shoved in the next page. You may, especially in the Bohemia theme, you may see a caption run off to the next page. Sometimes when you convert to Acrobat, it does that, but all that kind of stuff will go away. Don't worry about that. That it for us?
I don't know. I have only one comment. I didn't get very far into this document, unfortunately, but when you talk about the rancheros living in grand scale, well, there was a reason for that. The Mexican government allowed trade, and it was the cowhides that built their wealth. Otherwise, they would have probably been out there still scrubbing around the dirt. So the opening of trade was very, very important.
So maybe a statement or two in the Mexican period about trade, you would say, would help embellish that part of the discussion?
No, I'm just saying in the part that when you were talking about the Rancho era, when you were talking about Mexico's taking over of California, you said that the Ranchos developed, but they developed because of the California banknotes, the cowhides, and they were funding. They were not only saddles and buggy seats, but it was the big belts in the industries that those cowhides contributed to.
Okay, that's something we can add.
I mean, that's just a minor little blip.
Do you want me to go next? Or?
Sure, go.
Well, I have a few comments, and this being the first time I've had a chance to read the document, I'm glad the staff sent it to us early because it was long but very interesting. And I thought it was very well laid out, better than the past iterations. I understood it. And I think when people buy, I want them to buy a copy because I think we should publish it and have it for sale to people because it's another good history of our architecture and our cultural background. Also, the themes I think that you've put together really dovetail nicely with the architectural and historical development of the village right up to 1986. I think it'll help the public the way you laid out the idea of the eligibility requirements for listing on the inventory and also the integrity thresholds. That's never really been discussed much, and I think that's going to help people in making their decisions and understanding what we're doing here. And one note that you might want to do, I noticed on page 7, the woman who is was the outreach coordinator in Sacramento, Diane Barkley, has retired. And I don't know, yes. You might want to change that or put a different name in. I think you had 2 names, but Diane
just retired.
Just retired, yes. Yeah. So that you might want to check. Okay. And also, I saw on the 12th page, the section of the statement should be required reading, in my opinion, because you say that historic preservation in Carmel lays out the reasoning behind the purpose of the historic context statement. And that is so true. When you read it with that in mind, you see why we are doing this and with the importance of having a historic context statement. So that particular section on page 12 I thought was very well done. And our former board member here, Thomas Hood, who was an architect, is an architect and is of high regard, he has drilled into my head the idea that architecture is a continuum and that styles develop over time, and through good design we have what we have in Carmel, and it doesn't just stop at a certain point. So I think that emphasis of the continuum of architecture and the decades that we're featuring up to 1986, I think that's really excellent, and that is seen in this document. My other observation is that I think the commercial historic district you mentioned in the reading, and also the fact that it functions as a historic district in town, the Downtown Conservation District. Yeah, and I think that's very important to emphasize that so people know that we don't have a historic district, but we do have a semblance of one through Comstock Hill and also through the Downtown Conservation Districts. One very minor change is, and I had to learn this myself being a member of the Carmel Women's Club, it's Women's Club, not women. I don't know why. But starting in 1925, they developed as an organization. They'd been operating before then, but I know it's called the Women's Club, and I think we probably should change that.
So is it plural apostrophe? So is it woman apostrophe S? Or
that's what I see. Yeah. Carmel Women's Club.
Yeah.
My understanding too.
Got it. Okay.
So we don't want to cause any upset in the village.
I want to make sure we mention it because they're a big part of the arts and crafts and city beautiful movements.
I know.
Every city had it.
I used to call them women, and that's wrong. So that's on page 54. I noticed.
54. Got it. Okay.
And I think the section that you've come to, the vernacular and the arts and crafts styles, is very well done. And I'm looking forward to the next part that you bring to us, because I think these themes are better than the old 5 themes that we had that are kind of generic. I think what you've done by emphasizing it the way you have is good.
Excellent.
So as I said before, I hope that we can get this in a position where it could be published and purchased by people who are interested in the architecture and history here. I think it'll clear out the misimpression that we seem to have in town that Carmel's history has to stop at a certain place, and we can't go forward into the decades of, say, the mid-century period and others. It's not the way it's done throughout the country, and I think we need to get on the bandwagon and push for the decades to all be represented up to 50 years ago. So thank you very much for the work you've done. I was very impressed.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, touching back on what Catherine was saying, I especially appreciated the how-to section, which is what we had talked about, but just having that laid out of how to use this document, I think it's, and then all the different processes that we go through with our board and just the historic preservation processes of the city is all laid out in this document. So you don't have to go to multiple locations to understand how our system works and how the historic preservation laws work. So I very much appreciated that. I was thinking about reviewing again because we seem to be coming up with this issue again and again and again, is relating the character defining features of a style and particular houses. So I think this is just a nice opportunity and I think you're probably doing that, but to carefully look at each of those character defining elements that are stated and each of the styles that are listed, and then maybe do a cross-reference with buildings on our inventory that are supposed to show these features, and do they or don't they? And these styles, of course, need to be, these are styles that are international or national or regional, but also how they're used in our city, and not to negate those character-defining elements that are in the arts and crafts style from Pasadena, because that's where a lot of it started, but it's nice to see how it's used here. If we're going to call something arts and crafts in Carmel, let's make sure we...
North Berkeley,
And it started in Berkeley, yeah, with Maybeck and everything. So,
the Simple House.
so that, I'm just trying to make sure things become consistent and it makes it easier for staff and us to make these decisions, because I'm finding a lot of times in the DPRs, this is probably another project, is to go back to the different historic DPRs that look at each of the different buildings on our inventory and kind of make sure they're categorized accurately.
Good point.
So I'm not saying that's part of this job, but just certainly the reviewing the character defining features just in a little more detail, and maybe be able to at some point come to us and talk about why these features are in there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I've taken notes on that. And you are our committee member, so if you want to meet, let us know. But take a look at how we've done A and C right now, arts and crafts and vernacular. The vernacular is evolving. We're still going to...
That's a much more amorphous thing, yeah.
Yeah, there's this early vernacular, right, which are basically wood cabins, and which almost none of them are left, right? And then we get into where Murphy comes in, and we're starting, and maybe Percy Parks and other people coming in, and the lumber yards here, and they're now building from sawn materials they can get rather easily. So the vernacular looks a little more structured, might we say, during this particular theme.
Yeah.
This next theme is going to be very time consuming because we want to develop. We don't have it yet, but we're working on it. We want to develop the, what can we call something a Carmel cottage accurately and define it, because, we're getting a lot of these that come up for review. Mm-hmm. Of course, there's a period revival styles. We all recognize those. We all have our books that show those, right? Even arts and crafts is so well documented. But there is some locality here going on with the cottage, we believe. Got to see if we can demonstrate that on paper so someone can come in and use it as a review tool.
That would be
Not sure yet.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
Parts is parts.
Yeah. It's like breaking down a patient, for review or an autopsy or something. Sometimes it's somewhat easier to look at buildings from that technical standpoint. And regarding the inventory at the DPRs, we've printed a set out for each of us. And because of this man and Rick Janik's such great work doing all the survey, there's a lot on that survey. A lot of it's well researched and documented. You could literally write histories of Carmel off the DPRs, at least architectural development. So they've been very useful. And yes, there will be I've been scanning the spreadsheet for what we're calling a certain style, and sometimes it says it's a slightly different style. So the ones that are on the inventories. But I think that's something we could do later. Mm-hmm. I don't even think we would need a grant or anything, something like that. I think it could be fairly minimal, to do that coordination. I don't know yet, but we have been thinking about that, exactly what you would mention. So it's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Good
Great.
work.
Okay, so if we don't have a full theme finished by the next meeting, do you still want an additional submission? I just don't know yet. I'm having a couple of physical issues that can't quite work as long as I usually can. But we'll do our best, let's put it that way. I mean, this is our baby, so.
Yeah. Catherine, what is the time frame again? Is that we're still on track for that?
We're on track. We have until January to be fully done.
Okay.
We'll certainly have the writing done before that. I'm just worried about all the commission meetings and everything, getting it all ratified. But there won't be any issue with getting the writing done.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
It's just getting this next theme is a really beefy one, and it might take a month.
And the January is, the grant funding is based on the approval of that by the city council?
Yes.
Okay.
So we're on a tight timeline for sure. It's a big job.
Okay, so let's just make a note for us to get together to talk about, the schedule is getting modified slightly, but I want to make sure we know what our end dates are.
Okay.
Well, great. Really glad.
Thanks for all your work. It's looking
Thank
good.
you very much.
I think he still has to do something, so I'm going to go.
Yeah,
Bye, Seth.
he's gonna go away.
Okay. Any more staff comment on that?
Public comment?
Oh, yeah, I'll open the public hearing for anybody else to have comments on our historic context statement draft update. If anyone's interested in that process or what's been brought up. And the drafts, of course, are all on our agenda online, so you can download those for yourself and review that. Okay, seeing none, close the public hearing. Is there any more staff comment? No.
There's no one on Zoom.
See you, Seth.
Someone just raised a hand.
Okay, we'll open a public hearing, whoever that is.
Okay, Nancy Toomey, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry. I actually didn't mean to, but, great work, great project. Love seeing this happening. So thumbs up, all good.
And Nancy, you can confirm it is the Women's Club?
Yes, WOMAN''S,
That's what I
correct.
thought. Got it.
And that's how
Okay.
we were originally incorporated. So yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else?
There's no one else.
Okay, I'll close the public hearing. I don't think the board has to take any action on this item, but is there any more staff comment or?
There is not.
There's not, okay. Okay, we'll move on to our public hearings. And the first item on the agenda is HE 23285, Community Foundation for Monterey County, consideration of a determination to list the Alice Y. Nugent de Delvin House located at Monteverde Street 4 southwest of 3rd on the Carmel Inventory of Historic Resources. Staff report, please.
All right, thank you for the introduction. So this evening we'll be taking a look at Historic Evaluation 23285, Community Foundation for Monterey County, and considering whether to list the Alice Y. Nugent de Delvin House on Monteverde 4 southwest of 3rd on the inventory. So in the fall of 2023, we received an application from a former owner, an applicant, for a historic evaluation. As you might know, we typically start with an initial assessment. However, in this case, the applicant opted to bypass the initial and move on straight to the intensive survey, just anticipating one might be warranted. So as you can see there, our code says if it appears to meet the criteria for the inventory, or if a very definitive determination of eligibility or ineligibility can't be made, then the intensive is required. So in this case, we just started with the intensive right off the bat. And in September 2023, the city contracted architectural historian Margaret Clovis did determine that the subject property represents the theme of architectural development, the craftsman style, and it retains integrity. It's over 50 years old, and it meets California Register Criterion 3. And so she determined that it was eligible for listing on the inventory. And this evening, you'll be discussing the DPR form and the staff report, and we also have several second opinions to consider. Let's get started. So here you see an aerial view of the cottage. It was built in 1922. We do have an original building permit, and we have a newspaper citation crediting the master builder, designer Earl Percy Parks. The original owner was Baroness Alice Younger Nugent de Delvin. We do not have any original plans, and we do not have any original or historic photographs. And I'll just mention, as we go forward, you can always assume that up is north. So the city consultant and staff agree that it is significant as a good example of the craftsman style by master designer builder Earl Percy Parks. And these are the character defining features that were identified in the DPR form. Single story, front facing, segmented U-shaped plan, side gabled roofs with knee brace brackets, wide over hanging eaves and exposed rafters, fenestration, various fenestration, board and batten and Carmel stone siding, a brick chimney, Carmel stone front patio, enclosed by the U-shaped plan, a front entrance covered by a shed roof with knee brace brackets, pentagonal bay and service porch, and then the detached garage, which actually staff would recommend is not a character defining feature as it doesn't date to the original 1922 construction date, but it's first shown up on the 1930 Sanborn map. I'm going to talk about integrity a little earlier than normal because it is definitely a factor at play here. There are 7 aspects that define integrity here: location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. And in order to convey historical significance, As I said, a craftsman-style cottage built by Percy Parks. A property will have integrity for listing if it retains the majority of its character-defining features. And in this case, we don't have the original plans, we don't have photographs, we have 3 permits, 1922 cottage, same year, 1922 service porch, and then a 1962 interior remodel. We know that was following a fire. We don't know the specifics of that remodel. And then we have a submission to us where a source was found that there may have been a fire, I believe in the 30s, so that could have caused some changes as well, but we don't have permits for it. The Sanborn maps show no changes whatsoever to the building footprint, so that's what you see there. You can kind of see the bay at the southwest corner. It's still there today. And then there are definitely unpermitted observed alterations, some of which are quite clear. And these are, the ones that are quite clear are on the side and the rear. So that's a couple of aluminum slider windows and a few window openings that have been either partially filled in or fully filled in. So I'm just going to go through the photos and describe the home. So here you can see the front patio and the front entry. We have French doors with kind of 4 single clerestory lights above, and that shed roof supported by brackets with flanking tripartite slider windows. Here, I've kind of tried to, as if you're standing right in front of the home looking directly west, this is what you see. You see your front entry and then wings on either side. Both wings have a single pedestrian doorway and then fixed windows. You'll notice that the fixed windows are divided light, but they don't precisely match the divided light pattern flanking the front entry. Here we see, starting on the left, you have the south wing with those brackets supporting the extended eaves. And then the central photo there is the service porch with a rubble stone base. And it's not just a veneer, it's definitely structural rubble you can see on the inside as well. Here we're at the back of the property. We have that pentagonal bay with another entry door. We have casement windows, all wood here in this image, and then the slider as well, and the exterior brick chimney. And then here you can see the north wing with the detached garage that was first shown on the 1930 Sanborn. You can kind of see some of those fully infilled and partially infilled window openings in this image. And then a few detail shots for you. These are the brackets on the left side. Those are the north wing brackets, and then the south wing is on the right. And these are the brackets at the front entry door. I can go back and forth. One of our second opinions asserted that the front brackets do appear newer, and I would say that is the case. This could be, we really don't know. It could either be rebuilt in kind following a fire or a tree, or it could be not in kind, but here again is the comparison. And then on the right side of the screen, we have our exposed rafters, which are on the south and the north wings. And in the upper right-hand corner is a detail of the central volume exposed eaves. And I'll just read the caption there. The exposed rafters are truncated and have sistered extensions. It was thought that perhaps this reflects a construction error where the rafters were simply not long enough to reach the fascia. We're really not sure. It's simply something I'm pointing out as something that's different about the central volume. Here's a close-up of our divided light slider windows and our divided light doors. And then here you can show we really do have a collection of fenestration. We have a couple of aluminum sliders, some partially infilled openings. We don't believe the opening maybe on the service porch is original. But again, all of these photos here are not visible from the public right-of-way, and they're on side and rear elevations. And here's just a couple views of the property, that detached garage, and the wood gates at the front of the property. So to determine eligibility, there's some shoulds and there's some shalls. So it should be representative of at least one theme in the context statement, and we are saying that is architecture. It shall retain substantial integrity, that's a must. It should be a minimum of 50 years old, and it certainly is at 1922. And then it shall meet at least one of the following 4 criteria. And we are saying it meets criterion 3, that it embodies the distinctive characteristics of a type, period, region, or method of construction, or represents the work of a master or creative individual, or possesses high artistic value. And it's a good example of a style. So that's what our code says. And I've added the text here in green, that it is a craftsman cottage. And just keep in mind, it doesn't need to be the first craftsman cottage in town, or the last, or the only, or the best, or an exceptional example. And then in addition, it represents the work of a master, and that is Earl Percy Parks. So of criterion 3, you only need to hit 1, and we're asserting that it hits 2 criteria. So the context statement describes the craftsman style, and it lists these features. The subject property reflects all of them except for the 2 in red. It has board and batten siding, and the windows the frames aren't particularly extended. They're quite simple. Otherwise, we check all these boxes. Horizontality, low-pitched gable roof forms, exposed rafters, exposed structural elements. We got wood, we got brick, we also have stone. It's a U-shaped plan, which is really quite unique. And one of the most prominent character defining features of this cottage. And then that front Carmel stone porch. We have the tripartite windows. We have sliding, we have casement windows. In addition to the architectural merits of the home, it's designed and built by Earl Percy Parks, who came to Carmel in 1919, just 2 years before the subject cottage was built. Percy Parks maintained his office on Dolores Street. You can see the first picture on the left there. And he's also credited for the Mary Dumage shop, hope I pronounced that right, there in the middle, and the Seven Arts building. And then the subject house is an example of his early work. These buildings here came later. A bit blurry, apologies there, but this is the pine cone reference that says Miss Alice Y. Nugent is building a house on North Monteverde with Percy Parks as architect and contractor. And I'm going to read this block of text here. It is included in the DPR form to reflect why Parks is a local master builder. So, among the most progressive building contractors who in recent years have done so much toward the advancement of the material interests of Monterey County, Earl Percy Parks, a substantial contractor of the thriving village of Carmel, is entitled to special recognition by reason of the fine character of the work he's done. During the time of his residence at Carmel, he's had charge of the greater part of the really substantial building operations there carried on, and the evidences of his craftsmanship are visible on all sides. Many of the notable residences erected there during that time have been built by him, and not a few of the more substantial of the business buildings, including a fine business block, which he himself owns. It is needless to say that good taste and enterprise, coupled with up-to-date methods of construction, characterize all of these operations, and the present attractive appearance of beautiful Carmel-by-the-Sea thus owes much to this energetic builder. And I read that because it's in the DPR report. However, Parks was inadvertently not explicitly recognized in the concluding statements of the DPR form. I did follow up with the consultant, and she confirmed via email a couple days ago that it was an inadvertent error and that she did intend to attribute significance to Parks. And I should say, I'm going to just go back a couple. that it represents the work of a master, Parks, because it is one of his earliest works. Sorry, my recommendation there came a little too early because there are only a few Parks buildings on our inventory. There are 5 residences on the inventory, 4 of which are craftsman style. The 5th one is a Spanish style building. So I have pictures of the other 4 craftsman buildings here. The Elizabeth Sullivan House. Looks like this one's a 1927 cottage. We can come back to any of these. The Jacob Krebs House, 1926, also craftsman. Moritz de Haas, 1925. It was a bit hidden by vegetation, but you can see the DPR photo there. This one in particular I think is very interesting because it has a moon gate inspired entry, and this is kind of something you would never see in a typical craftsman home. But here in Carmel, there are, a unique flair on craftsmen, and here, this moon gate, it's still a craftsman home on our inventory. And then the William Muench Cottage, looks like 1929. This one, also craftsman, and I bring this one up because when thinking about integrity and whether or not these cottages retain integrity, we're looking at fenestration. Yes, does it have its original windows? What's changed? Footprint. It's worth noting that the city approved a considerable addition to this cottage and found that it still meets the Secretary's standards. So in green is what's historic, and everything around it is an addition, and this is still on our inventory. So my staff recommendation is to adopt a resolution adding the Alice Y. Nugent de Delvin House on Monteverde 4 southwest of 3rd to the Carmel Inventory of Historic Resources. We have received 6 second opinions asserting that the house either is not a good example of the craftsman style and or does not retain integrity, and those are all in your packet. And then a 7th report was received today, and I believe we have some folks in the audience or on Zoom that wish to speak, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Oh, one more thing. You might have noticed today on the tour that it's currently vacant and in poor condition. And as you might know, condition is not something we're considering tonight. That's not part of when we're determining if something is significant or has integrity. Condition is out of the picture, as you might know from looking at our Jeffers cabin in town. So if something is not looking so well cared for, that's kind of a phase 2 where someone would come and say, we want to do these repairs. We look at that completely separately.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Any questions of Catherine from the board? No? Okay, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing then. Is the architect here? Eric?
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Miller. I'm the architect representing the project.
Let me pull it up for you, Eric.
If you could, I would appreciate it. Thank you. If this works, there we go. Is this mine?
If it's not working, I'll just forward for you.
This is not mine. Mine should have,
Okay.
the first slide should be this. So mine is the building condition and construction from Lewin. You were going to add that. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Okay, so you can see the aerial of the house, and I'm not going to use the laser because I know it's kind of bad for the people at the dais. So, but if you look at the photograph, you see there's a gable on the right as it intersects with the lower roof on the right, And it's also got an odd roof shape on the left. That center section was added. And so because it was added, I added the Sanborn map on top to see that there are some differences. I think those are overhangs, and I think it has to do with the center addition of the building. And so it's not moving.
I'll just forward
There we
for
go.
you.
Okay,
It might
you
not
can
be
do forward.
turned on
Oh,
either.
thank you. So obviously there's subsidence on the lot, and the building is not level inside. I think there's some subsidence on the foundation. And you can see where they poured patios right up against the wood. So obviously the wood is wicking up water. Go next. So you can see the foundation is below grade. And because it's below grade, that means there's a lot of damage on the wood because it, again, wicks water up. And the foundation is standard. So next. So this is the part that was added. So if you look at the timber in this piece, the ridge beam is like a 4x6 and the rafters are 4x4. And you can see that the beams go outside, and I think that they just didn't have them long enough, so they scabbed on those 2x4s to match the rest of the house. But in this picture, you can also see the clear story windows that I think were clearly added when they added the center section. I'm only guessing that it was the 1962 edition, or maybe a tree fell on it. But this is not a Percy Parks element. So next. So you can see the old part that Percy Parks did do. You can see the ridge is a 2x6 and the rafters are 2x4. And you can see these, I think, are pieces of the one story that were original but have been manipulated in terms of the window openings. I know new windows don't count for historicity or lack of historicity, but opening changes do. So next. So you can see again, there's a opening change in this. So next. And obviously, it's not well plumbed or electrical. So next. And you can see that the masonry is in terrible condition, and I don't think was ever well done. And you can see the rafters again are part of the old building. Next. So you can see the center section that was added and became a taller clear story element. Those windows there really don't have anything to do with craftsman architecture. I believe the door was there, and I believe they added everything above the door because you can see a crack around the room at the header height. So next. So obviously the corbels on the new section are different than the corbels on the old section because someone rebuilt that entire middle section. So I think it was in the 60s. So next. And obviously it's in poor repair. I think this is part of the original Percy Parks building. So next. Again, the same problem with the stone. So next. So the shed, I understand it's not an issue, but it is falling apart. Next. That's the shed's coming apart. So I don't think the building has integrity because I think the whole center section was new and had nothing to do with Percy Parks. I think the lower sections did. And I think when you go to the back of the building, you can really see how they turn that fascia around, then it reorients itself like it used to connect the other roof. So construction methods are fundamentally different on the center section. All the fascias that are currently there on the existing indicate that in fact the whole center section is new. The style is different on the center section with the clear story windows. So the building really completely lacks integrity. But I also want to point out, and this is maybe something that this committee should think about a little bit, based on the fact to just say we decided we wanted to keep it, which we won't. You couldn't really remodel it or repair it because your definition of demolition is tearing down more than 51%, and taking out a window and putting it in is considered demoing that wall. Taking out stone and putting it back is considering demoing that wall. So this is definitely a demolition, no matter which way you look at it. And I know you're not supposed to look at the structural quality of the building, but you'd have to tear it down to repair it. So foundation. And then you'd be repairing a building that wasn't designed by Percy Parks. You'd have to find out who did that center section because that's now the character defining feature. So, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. the other owner's representative come.
Afternoon, Anthony Lombardo on behalf of the applicant. Find my presentation there. A couple of things I'd like to start with, which are that the fact that whether this is Percy Parks or Frank Lloyd Wright, the Department of Interior standards for determining something historic is not that it's done by someone who's well-known or famous or a great architect. It's, is this work great? And everything, in fact, the Secretary of Interior standards, sorry, I said Department of Interior, Secretary of Interior standards, in fact, give the example that everything designed by Frank Lloyd Wright is not historic. And if this was designed and built by Percy Parks, this doesn't qualify either. And I say if because the only evidence that we have that is actually not evidence, which is a little blurb out of a newspaper that said the owner hired him to design and build the house. Well, I'm familiar with Mr. Parks' other work, and this sure as heck doesn't look like anything else that he ever designed or built. But if it was designed and or built by him, it is certainly not an exemplar of his work that deserves preservation, as do the others that are on the list. From the list that you were shown by, or the photos you were shown by staff bear no relationship to the design or quality of this house whatsoever. So the staff has stated that it's consistent because it's the work of a master. As I mentioned, not every master's work is eligible. Next slide, please. Some of the several peer reviews that were done on the city's analysis concluded that was correct statement. Ms. Brunzel said this house is an early design and does not meet the standards of the more cohesive, attractive projects of the self-taught builder designer executed later in his career. Barbara Lamprecht said the project cannot even be conclusively associated with Mr. Parks because the only evidence we have is that blurb from the newspaper. Next, please.
Should I skip over this one?
I just had one question.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And maybe you can corroborate this. So Park's name is not on the original building permit you said you have?
There is not
Okay.
I'll look it up while we're discussing and
Okay.
check, but
Then the standards, of course, for architectural integrity is that it must be substantially intact and include the character-defining features for the type of architecture which could be considered significant. And as staff pointed out, it can't just have one item or a couple of items. It says it should retain a high degree of physical and architectural integrity. So, and those include sufficient character-defining features, none of which, for all intents and purposes, exist in this home. The original form and roofline, which do not exist. The original fenestration, which does not exist. And the original exterior cladding, which may exist, although it's apparently of different thicknesses in different locations, which probably indicates rebuilds that were done after the fire or after the tree or after some owner decided to change it. But they're not the originals as Eric described earlier. Next, please. So, whoa, that's hard to read. So staff put up earlier the elements that Ms. Clovis said were character-defining features. Staff disagreed with the last one, which was the garage, because clearly it was not done during the period of significance, so that's incorrect. Most of the other items which I outlined in red, which you can't hardly read, include items which can't possibly be character-defining features of a craftsman home because they describe any home, for example, being a single story. There's nothing about single story that's unique to craftsman-style homes. Clear story windows, which are listed here, are not a craftsman-style indicator. Brick chimney is not unique to craftsman style. I would argue that almost every home built prior to the probably 1970s had a brick chimney. Carmel stone on the front patio is not indicative of a craftsman-style home. The front entrance being covered by a shed roof with knee braces is not indicative. French doors are not indicative of a French-style design. So when you take this list that Ms. Clovis provided, subtracting the one that the staff said was incorrect, the majority of the others are not indicative of craftsman-style homes. There are three: the window fenestration, the gabling, and the knee brackets with the large overhangs. Well, as we can see, the large overhangs were added later because there are 2x4s scabbed onto the larger roof rafters. Someone speculated that that may have been because they didn't get wood that was long enough and added onto it. There is no evidence that substantiates that conclusion. That's pure speculation. And it's clear from the photos Eric showed you, there have been dramatic changes, either intentionally or as a result of tragedy, like a fire or a tree hitting the building, which do not retain the existing or the original character of the structure. Next slide, please. So the historic context statement has characters that equate to a craftsman-style home. The first one is overhanging gable roofs. Well, we know those were added later. Stucco or shingle siding, which are not present on this home. And then an L or U-shaped with sliding hinged casement and double hung sash windows, which are also predominantly not existing on this home. Next slide, please. As to the shape of the home, Ms. Brunzel was one of the architectural historians who reviewed this, said that this does not indicate what you would associate with a craftsman-style home because the U-shape is in reverse. Craftsman-style homes that are U-shaped, the U faces away from the street, if that's the right way to describe it, rather than towards the street. Next, please. As to the windows, Ms. Jones from Stanford said the house lacks the decorative windows that typify craftsman style. Ms. Lamprecht said the casement windows, which are an overwhelming characteristic, are not present, and the sliding windows, according to Huntington Library's archivist, are definitely not a craftsman characteristic. And Ms. Brunzel said there are at least 5 different styles of windows in this house. So you can't say that even the casement windows are a predominant style because there are so many different styles. Next slide, please. As to the siding, Dr. Kirk said the historic context statement makes no reference to board and bat siding as being a characteristic of a craftsman house. That Brunzel said it's not typically part of a craftsman style. And she also states that because of the different sizes of board and bat siding, some of it appears to not even have been original. Next slide, please. As to the brackets, Brunzel says the provenance is unclear. Lamprecht says that the knee bracing are in perfect condition, whereas the rest of the bracing is not, indicating they're not original to the house. And Mr. Seavey said that the knee bracing was done in the 1960s, which was also the time he postulates the shed roof over the front door. Next slide, please. The doors, the front, Lamprecht says front doors of craftsman-style homes are typically solid. This is a French multi-light door. Brunzel says the 3 windows, which are, I think, the ones that he's referring to in the transom, from the public right-of-way, as well as 4 different types of doors on the front elevation, are indicative of significant alterations over the time of the existence of the house. Next slide, please. The overhanging roof, again, significant changes there, and in fact, clearly that porch being added later indicates that there was no overhang on the roof. Next slide, please. As Eric showed you earlier, if you look at the Sanborn map and look at the house that exists today, it bears no resemblance. You see the left side element is far different than the right side element from the 1924 Sanborn map. It's probably, as a result of either the tree damage or the fire, the house was rebuilt, altering those images. As, next slide please, Ms. Clovis said that there are observed alterations including side and rear fenestration, the aluminum windows, the window openings having been changed, and some entirely filled in. Next slide, please. So Mr. Seavey said there are at least 2 periods where significant changes occurred to the structure, and those are not indicative of either craftsman style or of the original design. Next slide, please. Ms. Jones said the alterations of the home have been extensive, and Lamprecht said because it's been altered so extensively, it's not clear that the house retains any single theme. Next slide, please. The conclusions, Mr. Seavey said it's not qualified to be listed. Ms. Jones said it's neither an example of early vernacular or craftsman. Dr. Kirk said it should not be placed on the inventory. It's not an example of a craftsman style. Ms. Brunzel said as the building lacks distinctive character required to be listed under criteria 3. And Ms. Lamprecht said that it's not eligible because it does not meet the criteria. Next, please. Some of the physical appearances that show that some of these are not original construction, like for example the patio, as I pointed out on the field trip, the concrete is higher than the siding of the building, which would not have been the case had it been built. Not only does it create structural problems, but clearly not original. There's a modern drain in the center of the patio, or what's left of the center of the patio. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, you can see where the rafters were scabbed on to extend the length of the overhang. Next slide, please. The front entry, clearly not craftsman, and as Mr. Seavey said, clearly not original. I included this photograph of one of your listed historic craftsman homes, which the experts also commented on, which it has no elevated porch, elevated entry with porch. It's at grade with a shed sticking out over the front. Next, please. The window changes Eric's already talked about, and we showed you those. Next, please. So, as a matter of law, I guess, I have no qualification to comment on architecture whatsoever, but as a matter of law, to be historic, it has to be predominantly craftsman style home, which must retain its integrity. It has to be a craftsman style that retains first, and a craftsman house that retains its craftsman style. Clearly, neither of those are the case here. This house could be an anything style, not surprisingly because it's been altered so often. And to be listed, although the staff report bases it on the craftsman style, but to be listed because of its association with Mr. Parks, there has to be evidence produced that there's something about this design that makes it noteworthy as a Parks design or Parks construction. In other words, it can't just be because Frank Lloyd Wright designed it. The Secretary of Interior standards tell us that. It can't just be because, if he did, Mr. Parks designed it or built it. It has to be because there's something noteworthy about the design. It has to represent something, as the slide showed, that is unique to his style or an exemplar of something in his style that is important. Well, this is not an exemplar of anything. The house is, obviously in marginal condition, although that isn't what we're here to talk about today, but there's nothing about the style of the home that's unique. Or when you look at Mr. Parks' other listed structures, this doesn't even look like the same person did it. Assuming he did, you know, he obviously didn't invest a lot of time and money in designing this one because there's nothing that's unique about it, and whatever was there in 1922, most of it is gone now or has been significantly altered. So as a legal matter, I don't think there's any question that, first of all, we can't, you know, we have a newspaper article, which, by the way, in a court of law is not evidence of anything, because believe it or not, sometimes newspapers don't tell the truth. I know that comes as a shock, I'm sure, to everybody up here, but you couldn't introduce that as evidence in a court. But if you look at the house, look at his other work, and there's nothing there that is either craftsman, as that one I showed you from your historic context statement is, nor anything associated with any of Mr. Park's work, which was obviously quite extraordinary in a lot of cases. This isn't it. So with that, I'd like to ask Mr. Seavey to come up, since he's one probably knows more about historicity in Carmel than anybody I know, having done your last context statement. Thank you.
Tony. Mr. Seavey.
Kent Seavey, historic, 84. I'll leave it at that. I will try to use the 3 Bs: be clear, be concise, and be gone. For purposes of historic listing, the period of significance for the subject property should be 1922. That's its period of significance, the date it was constructed. The changes made in 1962 and possibly after significantly altered the character of the original vernacular college by addition of conjectural decorative features, including those identified by all of the peer reviewers, into a craftsman-like appearance, inconsistent with the interior standard 3 as noted in the staff report. The residence does not rise to the necessary level of high artistic value generally required for historic listing. However, Percy Park's 4 identified craftsman-style residences listed in the Carmel Historic Resource Inventory do represent such values. So he's well represented in that particular style of architecture. In closing, and this is interesting because you're going to be doing Whittig next, I drew from Whittig's material that you made available to me. In closing, I would like to note and paraphrase the staff analysis for Criterion 3, Architecture, for the Whittig House. It being not eligible for historic listing because, quotes, it no longer clearly illustrates that the house can be identified, in this case, in our case, as a 1920s vernacular home in Carmel. Because of renovations and additions to our case, 1922 property in 1962, and perhaps after, and your text for the one to be removed is transforming the home into a quasi-craftsman style that is easily confused with other styles. Leave it at that unless you have any questions. Yes?
I just want to say, Kent, that you and I have known each other since 1962, the year of the fire. So I want to...
Not 1906.
Not that far back. But I've known you a long time. I had the privilege, the city hired me in 2002 or 3 to peer review your historic survey. And so I've gone through the 300 or so listings that you prepared. And I wanted to ask you, I didn't remember it back then, but I want to ask you succinctly, why did you not include this house, which you obviously knew about, in your historic survey originally?
Because it looked like it does today.
All that time, 20 years ago?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We were very careful to do that. Also, we sent everything we had to state and asked state to review, and state took out 12.
And this was a red flag type?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's how you got a context statement coming out of that, the survey. That was pretty good, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Yes, sir.
No, I was just saying thank you.
Oh.
Unless there's any other questions? No? Okay. Anyone else wishing to address the board on this application may do so now. Please come forward. or raise your hand online? No one?
I do see someone, phone number in 481. If you would like to raise your hand, you can dial *9. Otherwise, I don't see anyone.
Okay. Oh, there. Cindy.
Cindy Lloyd, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, members of the Historic Resources Board. My name is Cindy Lloyd. I think the most fascinating part for me of this discussion is Catherine Wallace's extensive history on this particular house. I really appreciate everything that she has done to bring it to the fore, and also whatever other documentation has been included over the years. It certainly gives an amazing picture of how houses in Carmel were built long ago. As to an opinion on the historicity, I leave that to the experts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cindy. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the board for discussion. You would like to?
Well, this house is in a sad state. When we saw it today, I was sorry to see what the changes just over time and the neglect have caused. I think if the community foundation, the applicant, were here, I would ask why they, what their opinion of it was too. But after listening to the reports and reading the material, even though staff says that this is an example of craftsman style, I can't help but think that it's more of a vernacular, especially with the changes that have been made, some permitted and some obviously unpermitted. There are other better examples of Percy Parks' work. I think this reminds me, I mean, Percy Parks was not, and the owner, the Baroness, was not someone like, if this had history to it as well, that might be a different story, as evidenced by the Robinson Jeffers log cabin that we still have on the inventory, although it's still in pretty bad shape. I'm sympathetic to the thought that this might have to be reconstructed before it could be anything else, and I just don't feel it rises to the standard of physical integrity. I think too much time has gone by, and there has been benign neglect. And there is a phrase in the in the ordinance that talks about benign neglect, and I see this as an example of a house that has been let go. I don't know why over the years, because it's a beautiful setting, but I don't feel I could support it to be eligible for the inventory.
I think the house in the setting is quite beautiful. I would wish that if anybody were going to rebuild there, they might take a page out of the designer's book and do something similar to it that would fit into the site as well as this does. I'm not hung up on whether or not it's a great example of craftsman. I can accept vernacular cottage, and I've had that problem before. Maybe somebody should straighten me out on that. But I do think that there have been changes made to the house, and I think that would affect my opinion.
Okay. Thank you, Esther. My view of it is, I think there's, since there, unfortunately, there's no photographs of the original, and there seems to be just innumerable questions about the integrity. There's certainly the middle section of the house, we've been showed ways in which that probably was redone. And in terms of the quality of the craftsmanship itself, you know, I think, for example, the knee braces look a little bit tacked on, not really elegant and well proportioned, or showed any form of real craftsmanship like you see in some other examples around town of the craftsmanship. There seems to be even questions about whether Parks actually did the house. So cumulatively, all those question marks, I don't see a way to move forward with this, putting it on the inventory or making it eligible for the inventory. So with that, I will entertain a motion.
I would move that HE 23285 be determined ineligible for the inventory. That's it.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Board Member Dyer,
Yes.
Board Member Waltieri,
Yes?
Board Member Goodhue.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Moving on to the next public hearing item, HE 24157, Story, if I'm pronouncing that right. Consideration of a determination of historic ineligibility for the property located at the northwest corner of Lincoln Street and 8th Avenue in the R1 district. Staff report, please.
Thank you very much. Okay, so for background on this property at the northwest corner of Lincoln and 8th, we did begin with a phase 1 initial assessment in just a few months ago, June 2024. Margaret Clovis determined that an intensive survey was not warranted due to loss of integrity. Staff did issue a preliminary determination of ineligibility, and during the 10-day public appeal period, an HRB member requested a call-up, and the property sold during this time, and then the new owner voluntarily initiated the intensive assessment and carried forward the application. So in July of this summer, Ms. Clovis again determined the house was ineligible for listing due to loss of integrity. And once again, during that 10-day appeal period of the reissued preliminary determination of ineligibility, we again received that request to call up this application for further discussion. So here you can see the code language that says any member of the Historic Resources Board may call up a determination of ineligibility up for review by the board by filing a written request, which we did receive. This is a vernacular cottage built in 1904 by an unknown builder. The original owner was Ernest Wettig, a cement salesman, and the first occupant was Mr. Wettig's mother-in-law, Kate Hunter. No original plans are available. We do have Sanborn maps, however, and the original owner sold to Mr. John Starrow in 1925, and Mr. Starrow undertook several renovations between the years 1925 and 1936. Here are the two images. On the left, it's the 1910 Sanborn map. North is up. And then on the right, we have a current topographic map. So in green, I've attempted to overlay what we believe to be the original footprint of the cottage. I've also copied in the various permits that we know of. There's quite a few, but the ones of note are between 1925 and 1936, additions to the main cottage itself. I'll go through a few photographs here. Here we are standing looking at the home at the corner of 8th and Lincoln, looking northwest. Interestingly, the front door was originally on that south elevation, kind of in between where the window and the door is now. And then in 1932, M.J. Murphy did draw up plans to relocate and reorient the front door from an original south-facing orientation to east-facing. And the stairs were moved with it, and the Carmel stone entrance walkway. Additionally, in addition to the door being reoriented, the front porch was fully enclosed on the southwest corner of the home there, where the window is now. Here we are on Lincoln, looking southwest at some rear additions, multiple rear additions, indicated in red on the Sanborn map there. They have shingle siding to match the original cottage and wood windows as well. If this were to come before the board today, you'd likely be evaluating to see whether or not this is sufficiently compatible yet differentiated as well. It does not appear to be particularly differentiated in terms of material or craftsmanship. Here we are looking at the west elevation. The rear is on the left side of the image. That projecting front gable is an addition, and then on the far right side would be, originally it would have been an open porch, and now it's been fully enclosed. And here we have a detached garage converted to a guest house and a carport. Neither of these buildings are original. And here, all on one slide, an attempt to show you a bit of the construction chronology of the property. In faint green is what we believe to be the original cottage. You can clearly see the enclosure of an original three-sided porch, and now we only have one corner of that original porch with a reoriented front entrance and considerable rear additions.
Oh, can you go back to that?
Yes, absolutely.
So the 1962 is still showing?
Still shows the porch, it does. And the plans we have are dated 1932. So sometimes the Sanborn maps don't catch everything or weren't up to date, or it's also possible the 1932 plan showing the enclosure of the porch wasn't implemented until later. We don't know.
But there were plans in 1932 for the enclosure.
And I can go back to that. Here,
I see that.
You can see the plan to enclose the porch and move the door. And the date on that, as you can see in the upper right corner, is 32.
Then it wrapped around as well, right?
It did.
Yeah.
To the west, yeah.
So here are our criteria to be eligible for a listing on the inventory, and Ms. Clovis and staff believe it does not retain integrity at this point. Here are the 7 aspects of integrity that we looked at. While it is still in its original location, it no longer retains its original design due to the enclosure of the wraparound porch and the multiple additions. It is still located on its corner lot in a residential setting, but we have the garage and the carport added. Because it's been altered several times, we do have the loss of original materials. We don't have a record of the original workmanship. And it doesn't feel like a 1904 vernacular vacation cottage anymore. So while we don't have photographs or full sets of plans, there are a good handful of permits. Any one of them might have resulted in a loss of integrity. And we feel that cumulatively, certainly these changes have altered the footprint and the appearance of the original cottage and transformed it, what would have been vernacular, into a craftsman-looking building. And it's tricky to say what the character-defining features of the original cottage might have even been due to the extent of the changes. The standards for rehabilitation, Standard 4, does say most properties change over time, and those changes that have acquired significance in their own right shall be retained and preserved. So this is something we thought about. Did those additions, did the enclosure of the porch, has that acquired significance? Because it's certainly, the changes were older than 50 years old. We know that Murphy was involved in one of the plans, but we feel that even though it's possible for changes to be found significant, these changes in particular were made in a rather haphazard, piecemeal manner by various builders over several years and have not achieved significance in their own right. And it would be challenging to determine what the period of significance is for this house, which would need to span from the date of construction to the date of whichever renovation you find to be significant.
Just to clarify, that made sense to me, but the idea, I think there can be misunderstandings about that, because I think that's the way you said it was correct, that these changes that are made, if they're over 50 years old, have to be analyzed on their own merits and how they work with the rest of the house. They do not have to be, for example, done per, if secretary standards existed back then, they don't have to be done per that when they're adding to the original to make them significant. It's really it changes the entire entity of that house, and then that has to be evaluated
Well, this
on its
house,
own.
I'm sorry, this house was built in 1904. You can imagine what Carmel was then. There were no cars. Everything was, all the roads were dirt except for one paved road, I think, in the town. And I think most houses didn't have bathrooms. We owned a house built in 1908.
Esther, do you have
I am done.
Yeah, okay. I was just going to open the public, if you want to.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're making a comment. Okay, I'm sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
if you want to, I just say that you want to make your statement as part of your testimony.
Sure. We're discussing the house, so I'm sorry. I just kind of.
We're not discussing the house particularly yet. I just had a question about the second material
sorry
standards.
about that. Okay.
Yeah. But if you have a question for it, you can.
No, sorry.
No. We'll have time. We'll have the board comment soon.
I'm all done, so we could call for public comment.
Okay, no other questions of Catherine?
No.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Mr. Lombardo is back again.
Evening, Anthony Lombardo again on behalf of the property owner. I have a somewhat different perspective on this one because I was involved, my office handled the historic evaluation back in 2006, only 18 short years ago. Seemed like it was yesterday. And I was here in 1962 too, but Kent would not have spoken to me. I think I was in 3rd grade or something in Monterey. So we went through this exact drill in 2006 or 7, whenever it was. The home was proposed as a potential candidate. The HRB at that time, I don't remember who was on it then, considered it, and as staff mentioned, you should put your name so I don't have to keep calling you staff, Catherine. So this was all considered, all the original home, 1904, the home that's there now, which looks nothing like it did in 1904, and the conclusion by the city was that it did not qualify because of the extensive alterations that basically have resulted in a home that looks nothing like it did in 1904. The benefit we have is this determination was made in 2006, and nothing has changed in the house since then. So there's nothing about the house in 2024 that is any different than it was the last time this house was considered and was not placed on your historic inventory because it was so dramatically altered over its life. I have a PowerPoint presentation, but I'll spare it unless you want to see it about the changes that were made. But I think staff has pretty well described those over the life of this house. So if you have any questions, Mr. Miller happens to also represent the applicant in this one. He doesn't have any presentation, but he can talk to you about architecture and the different architectural styles there. But I think it's pretty self-evident. This is a collection of different owners' ideas over different decades of what to do with this house, and it does not retain any the original integrity for sure, nor any particular style. I said it looks sort of quasi-craftsman, but that's as a result of numerous changes and alterations that have been made by different people.
Could I ask you, Mr. Lombardo,
Yes,
is this where you have the arrows, the red arrows, now that's the entire wraparound porch that we
Right.
see as it used to be? Okay.
Correct. Yeah, and it appeared, I think, as I recall, the entrance was even moved. The front door wasn't where it is now.
Right.
It was relocated. So it's a very attractive house. You know, someone did a nice job on it, but that doesn't make it historic for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the board on this application? Anybody online?
There's no one online, sir.
Okay.
Oh, I spoke too soon. Cindy Lloyd, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you again, members of the Historic Resources Board. My name is Cindy Lloyd. I just want to again say thank you so much for the historic exploration done by Catherine and the members of the board to evaluate this. While the house does appear, you know, like a Carmel character house when you see it, I can understand that so many of the additions and renovations and alterations would make it ineligible for historic significance, but it is just kind of representative of good old Carmel building. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Cindy. Anyone else wishing to address the board before I close the public hearing? Okay. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. And now I can give Esther a chance.
Hello, everybody. Yeah. Okay, as I said, the house was built in 1904. I don't think we know who the contractors could possibly have been at that time, but we have to realize what Carmel was then. Most houses didn't have bathrooms. They didn't have kitchens. They were basically summer houses, just the way this one was. And we owned a house built in 1908, and the kitchen and bathroom wasn't put on until the 1920s. So I'm saying I think there are two important elevations of the house. One is the west, and the other one is the south. And the south, because of the fill-in of the porch, has been changed. There's no doubt about that. And the western elevation is pretty much as it was. If you look at the roof line of the house, if you look at the footprint of the original house, it's still there. And all of the additions.
The west or the east? I'm sorry.
The western. You're looking west, right?
Oh, it's facing east, so we call it the.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, well, whatever. It's on Lincoln Street. It's going along Lincoln Street. The windows are original. The roof line is original. The dormers are original. I suppose you could have called it American Foursquare at one time. But now, of course, it's vernacular, and I don't think there's anything particularly craftsman about it. This whole style thing is so subversive, subjective, that you really cannot put your finger on it. But I think if you were driving down Lincoln Street and you see this house, and you see the roof line, and you see the body of the house, it's okay, the porch has been changed, but it's still there. The 1904 house is still there under all of those additions. And as far as the part that faces west, that's really not visible. And that whole large addition in the back, you're not likely to be on 8th that often, but you are on Lincoln fairly often. And the garage and the carport, or guest house garage, they are basically on a separate lot. This house, the owners had 2 lots, and I think maybe being rather frugal, they thought, oh, well, we'll build on one and maybe we'll sell the other one later. And it was left completely vacant. So I don't see how the carport and the garage can really affect what's happening as far as looking at the house goes. The shingle siding, nobody said that wasn't original. I assume that was the way it was to start out with. The roof material is probably with shingles. That's what it is today. And the windows along Lincoln Street are pretty much original, except for maybe one. I don't know, in your report you mentioned one that wasn't, I don't know. So that's kind of what I've got to say about it. Also, I think it's a very important corner with the building across the street, which of course was built much later, the homestead. Those 2 corners really are Carmel, and they work together very well. I realize that's not something is in the determination area of this particular comment, but anyhow, that's what I think.
Okay, thank you, Esther.
Well, I think all the renovations that have been made to this house from 25 to 35, and I don't know if that's exactly when Murphy did some of the changes or had put his name on it, they could be considered historic if they were in their own right, if they were done well. But I think what's happened to this house is that the way we are supposed to be looking at it in this day and age is that were the additions differentiated and still compatible with the original? And I would have liked to have seen the 1904 model, but I think what has been added to, which is very visible on the east side coming down Lincoln and also on the front, to me, they have really caused the house to have lost its historic integrity. I feel the loss of the porch, which is a very significant feature of a house of this magnitude, and the loss of those original materials, they're permanently gone. They're not going to come back. So I feel that I would agree with the consultant and the staff that this is ineligible for the inventory.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. I guess I'll go back to sometimes we always say this, which is that it's a charming house, but there's so many things that have been lost to it over the years, and I'm not quite convinced about the shingles, when those were actually put on or not put on. So that, and the loss of the porches is a huge loss to the whole integrity of the house. So I don't see with that kind of changes over time in that sort of haphazard way that we can find it eligible.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we accept staff's recommendation to determine historic ineligibility for HE 24157.
I'll second. Roll call.
Board Member Dyer?
Yes.
Board Member Waltieri?
Yes?
Board Member Goodhue?
No.
Okay. Thank you all. Now we're on to Director's Report.
Lost our audience. Except for two.
So just a couple of updates this afternoon. We are still recruiting for a community planning and building director. So that recruitment is active. In the interim, Brandon will continue serving as the director until that role is filled. On August 21st, which is this Wednesday, from 6 to 8 p.m., there'll be a community meeting to discuss affordable housing over at the Sunset Center in the Carpenter Hall. So anyone interested can attend either in person or also on Zoom. It will be a live recording, and it will also be posted online after the meeting. And so this is an opportunity for the community to provide feedback on alternatives to housing, looking at ways to provide new housing that doesn't include the city-owned sites, which was part of our recent housing element adoption. So again, that's this Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. over at Carpenter Hall. And those are my updates.
Okay. Thank you, Marnie. I think any other future agenda items we want to bring up? I don't see any, so we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Very good.